Hi there, welcome to the DAMLab Makerspace. My name is Will, and today we're going to teach you how to use heat transfer vinyl for printing on garments. So the first thing you're going to do is bring up your Vinyl Master program. You're going to hit the new file. It's going to open up a page. What you then need to do is bring in your image from wherever you have it. You can bring in a normal JPEG, PNG, or PDF. What we're then going to do is hit the vectorize button. What we need to do here is vector the image so that our vinyl cutter can determine what path it needs to take to cut it out. So in this program you can do a whole bunch of different things. If you'd like to, you can mess with them. However, what you mostly need to do is make sure that this image is nice and black, that all the lines are clear, and that it looks good. If not, you can increase the amount of colors, and that can increase the cutting capacity. However, for this case, this works just fine. We're going to hit trace. It's going to trace the image, and then once it goes all the way through, you need to hit accept right here. Now we know that it's traced because it's in black and white. What we then need to do is set up our vinyl cutter. So we're going to move over to here. The important thing about the vinyl cutter is that you need to make sure you're using the right kind of vinyl. We have normal vinyl, which is used for stickers, and we also have HTV vinyl. You can tell the difference because it has this glossy side and the colors are quite different, while on the normal vinyl the backs are usually white and have a grid pattern typically. So what we're going to do is on this roller back here, we're going to put our vinyl in the back. This allows it to move nice and softly. Then what we're going to do is take the edge of your vinyl, slip it right on through, and get it nice and straight. You can use these lines over here. There's a ruler on this side, and use that to line up your vinyl to make sure it's straight. If it's crooked, you could end up slipping, and then your whole image in the vinyl is going to get messed up. Another important thing to note before we put this through is that if you notice here, there are these grooved rollers. It's really important to make sure that these back pedals, which we're going to move to clamp down our vinyl, are on the rollers. If you do not have it on the roller, it will again slip and you'll end up messing up your print. So what we're going to do is bring our vinyl through again. What I often like to do is making sure that our clamps are already over the grooves so we know exactly where they're going to be so we don't have to worry about that later. And I get it nice and straight, and then we're going to clamp it down. Normally, if you're doing a big print, you're going to have a whole roll of vinyl that's nice and clean and pretty. However, we just need to make a small one, so we're just going to use this kind of messed up jagged one. Then what we're going to do is bring it over here. If you look at this system right here, it'll tell you your speed, your pressure. Another thing to note is if you move the up and down arrows, you can change your speed. If you move left and right, you'll change your pressure. This is also the same interface that you're going to use to move the vinyl head. So the thing is you need to hit local pause here, and you'll notice that it'll say pause right on the dashboard right there. And now when I hit these arrows, it'll move the vinyl head. This is extremely important. A lot of people when they're doing it will often hit the arrows and not understand why the vinyl head is not moving. You need to make sure you hit local pause, otherwise you're going to be changing your speed and pressure, which could be problematic later. So for HTV, we're going to use about 100 speed and 91 pressure. If that doesn't seem to work with your vinyl, you can kind of move it around. If it's cutting too fast and screwing up edges, you might want to lower the speed. If it's not cutting very deep, up the speed or up the pressure. Kind of just play around with it, figure out what works best for you. So while we're in local pause, we're going to move the vinyl to just where this is in our bottom right. We're always going to start in the bottom right of our vinyl. Notice that there's this edge here. If I were to move this off, the back roller will slip off this vinyl and then we'll have issues later. So we're going to start on this section of vinyl here. Then once we're here, we're going to come back over to this dashboard here and hit the origin button. This now sets the head to be where it needs to be. So now that we're over here, you can change your sizing in the system here. Notice that it gives you the dimensions in millimeters. We're not able to move them into inches or anything like that. So if you can't understand millimeters, you need to look it up online and just find the conversion ratios. Also, another thing to make sure is that you have this lock button here, and that essentially means that your ratios will stay the same if you're changing things. So make sure it's locked. So if you change the width, the height will stay the same and it won't get all weird. So what we're going to do is hold the shift. So we're just going to make it different, or we're going to change the size just manually. So if you hold the shift key and then hit the corners, it'll keep it uniform and you can change whatever size you want. So we're going to make it that size. And then what we're going to do is hit this button up at the top here. It looks like a little vinyl or like a little knife. You click that guy and then hit send to cutter. Now on this page, it'll give us our dimensions again. Notice it shows it in the bottom right. That's where it'll start. Then what we're going to do is over here for HTV, we may need to make sure that that we click the mirror button. This essentially just makes sure when we do end up putting it on the press, it will print on the right side. Otherwise, it'll end up being inverted on your image, on your shirt itself. So a final thing we need to do is hit this area test button right before we cut. This is to make sure that we're using as much vinyl as we want, or the right amount of vinyl so we don't accidentally go over. So if you notice when I hit area test, and then it'll ask, are you sure? And I'll hit yes. Once it's done thinking, it'll give us a rough area of how big it's going to be. Okay, that looks great. So what we're then going to do is come back over to here, and there's a big cut now button. We're going to click that, and now it's going to ask, are you sure? You're going to hit yes, and then it's going to send the data. And we'll get right back to you when it's done cutting.
Approximately 10 hours later.
So now that we're done cutting, what we're going to do is take our vinyl out so that we can pick it and get it ready for the system. So again, I'm going to hit local pause over here in the dashboard. It's going to say pause, and now I can move the vinyl out. What we want to do is make sure we cut off what we need, but leave as much as possible for whoever's going to be using vinyl cutter next. So with HTV, I don't know if it's showing up on camera, but there are some slight lines to show you where your image is, and what you need to do is make sure that you cut around it. So we're just going to cut as straight of a line as we can. There we go. So now what we're going to do is use our tweezers. You can use any of them that you like. Be careful with I prefer the pointy ones, however you have to be careful that you don't punch through your image. So essentially what you're going to do is find where your image starts. And actually one thing I like to do is cut it out a little bit more so that we... There we go. So now it's more manageable size. What we're going to do is take this light here, which usually helps to find our lines, and you're going to pick the edge of it, making sure that you don't punch through to the other side. This is why I usually start with the outside of our image first, just to make sure. Now if you notice there, I have a backside that's transparent and sticky, and then I have this. So if I peel very carefully at a sharp angle, it should just break around our lines. If it's not breaking cleanly, that means that your pressure is wrong and you need more pressure. And essentially it just hasn't cut all the way through the vinyl. So it should just come off nice and clean like that. And now what we're going to do is go through and pick all the rest of the images, and we'll get back to you when we're done with that. So now that we're done picking our image, we're making sure that it's over by our press so that we don't forget it. A few things about the press that we're going to talk about. For this press, it has a timer so that you can't leave it on accident. So make sure that when you're using it, you boost it up to 60 minutes. This essentially is going to make sure that if someone were to walk away from it, that it will turn itself off so that it doesn't keep hot so someone might injure themselves. However, if you're going to be here for a few hours, like making shirts, make sure that you're aware of where that timer is, because the worst thing that could happen is if you're in the middle of a press and then it'll turn off and then your whole thing will cool down. It'll be a whole big problem. So another big thing to note is you come over to the right side of the press, you'll have your control panel here. You can change the temperature and time by hitting mode, and then notice the light turns on. That will change your temperature. You can use the up and down arrows to change that. Then if you hit mode again, it'll go to your time. We only want 10 seconds for this, so we're going to go down to 10 seconds. And then once we hit mode again, it'll hit 0 and then go back to the temp it's at. Normally when you turn on the press, this will start at around like 30 and then move its way up, so that you need to make sure that it's at that temp. Another big thing to note is this is your pressure changer here. That will depend on your garments. So if you're using a heavy t-shirt, you want to use less pressure because it's just going to already be pretty full. You can always test your pressure by taking the arm here and bring it down. Notice this is really light pressure here. It kind of just pops up. You know, that would be fine for kind of a heavy garment, but let's say that you're doing this. If you're like, I can just kind of tap that, that's way too low of pressure. And then on the opposite spectrum, if you push it down and all of a sudden you kind of have to like jump on it, or you really have to put some muscle into it, you're going to end up breaking the press eventually. You might be able to do it if you're really strong, but we'd rather you not break our presses. So make sure it's just kind of a nice, we kind of just mess around with it. Nice kind of like, nice click, nothing too crazy. So what we're going to do is take our garment. With HTV, the nice thing is you can use any color garment. It doesn't really matter as long as it doesn't contrast with your shirt. So if you're using a white shirt, you shouldn't be using white vinyl because it won't show up. So you take your shirt, lay out over here, making sure that you kind of remove as many bumps and wrinkles as much as you can. What we're going to do here is then press it for about maybe 3 to 5 seconds. This is just to get any wrinkles out, any moisture out. Pop it. So now it's nice and flat. Careful, this whole thing is extremely hot. It's at 305 degrees Fahrenheit. So make sure you don't touch this portion of the press while it's hot. The shirt can also get really hot while you're working on it, so be aware of that as well. Then what we're going to do is, usually what I like to do is base the collar off the top of this and then kind of balance the shoulders. For this example, we're just going to put it on, but if you're doing your own t-shirt, you might want to measure it or just kind of get it where you want it to be. So now that we have our image here, we're going to make sure that the sticky side on the back here is being placed down. We're going to put it where we want it, so we'll put it over the breast over here and just kind of smooth it out, make sure that there's no wrinkles behind it. Keep it nice and good like that. Keep in mind this is extremely hot again, so don't hit yourself on that. Then what we're going to do is we're going to put it down, and now the timer is going to wait for 10 seconds. What this is doing is essentially binding the adhesive to the shirt, and then once it's done, it's going to beep at us and we're going to peel it off. And it's just about done. You're going to bring it up, and then you're going to take the edge, keep in mind, again, very hot, and then just gently peel. Now we're going to take the shirt off the press. What I usually like to do is kind of ruffle a little bit just to make sure that it stretches. Otherwise, if you let it cool on its own, sometimes it can get a little weird. So, in that case, we're all done with our image.